Hello, welcome to today's screencast. The focus is our third topic within ethics and deviance in the sociocultural aspect of the course, and we're looking at gambling in sport. Now, the specification asks us to know two key things with regard to gambling. It asks us to know about match fixing and bribery. On top of that, it asks us to know about illegal sports betting. However, although these are three key terms associated with gambling, we'd have to be able to describe and give examples of. On top of that, we also need to be able to answer another question. You know, at the time of recording this screencast, gambling is in the news, okay? It really is in the news. It's everywhere. So what we have to have an understanding of is, as well as knowing what match fixing is, bribery is, and illegal sports betting is, we also need to have an understanding of why gambling is such a big problem in modern sport. So we need to have an understanding of that. Now, the things that we look up at the top here are all things that are associated with gambling being illegal. So you're not allowed to match fix. You're not allowed to bribe officials or players. You're not allowed to use illegal sports. These are the deviant acts within gambling. But we also know that we see gambling in every single sporting event. Certainly if you're interested in sports such as football, you will see it every time you watch it on the TV, or even if you go live. There are lots of ways. So we have to understand why gambling is such a big problem in sport in general, not just illegally. Okay, so let's have a look there. Let's start off with our key terms associated with illegal gambling. So if we start off, I'll put them down here. So I've just put this as a point to start with. Gambling in sport, and a key thing here is gambling is not a form of deviance or illegal, okay, on its own. You can go, if you're 18, you can go into a bookies, you can go into any bookmakers and make a bet. However, it becomes illegal when it associates to these three things here. So match fixing then is basically referring to when you play a game to a completely or partially predetermined result. Okay, that is your key definition here. So that top bit, the bit that I put in black and red there, that is a key bit. On top of that, just as an understanding point on top, this can be linked to players, team, referee underperforming to ensure the result is skewed to a specific favourable outcome. Okay, so you can see how that would work there. And I've put an example here of match fixing. Perhaps the most famous example of match fixing was in 2006 in the Italian Serie A Football League. And basically it involved probably the most famous team in Italy, Juventus, alongside others, but Juventus being the main one. And basically their club was involved in, the officials within their club, the owners within the club, basically were fixing certain referee appointments for certain big games. So whenever there were games that Juventus needed to win, their officials would bribe or make sure that they got referees to referee their games favourably so they would win the games. This had a name, we'll have a look at it a bit more in the lesson, and it was called the Calciopoli scandal in 2006. And ultimately, to sum that up in a very shorthand, it involved Juventus fixing referee appointments as it went through that. Now, if match fixing then is playing a game to completely or partially predetermined results, bribery is this act of giving money or gifts to gain an unfair advantage. So what this often is linked to, it can be linked to match fixing, of course. It can also be linked to illegal sports betting. So how it would work is, and I'll give an example of this, South African cricket player called Hansie Cronje. He was the captain of South Africa, and he accepted money from an illegal sports bookie that basically asked him to underperform. And what this meant was that whilst he was going into a game, he agreed to underperform. He took a massive financial sum of money, in this case, to underperform at a certain point. This allowed illegal sports betting companies to put lots of money on that outcome. So they were giving people odds on this outcome, which obviously nobody else had any knowledge of. So this was an example of bribery in action there. Finally, we have illegal sports betting, which kind of links to all of these. So if I say from here, what is it? It basically involves placing a bet with an unregistered bookmaker known as a bookie. And it's obviously, as I said up there, linked to match fixing, bribery, and organised crime. So I'll put those there. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, illegal sports betting. Now, this happens all the time. So what it means is, you know, it's not like, you're not talking things like Ladbrokes, you're not talking things like Betfred, they are legal. Okay, so they're regulated by the government, whereas illegal sports betting companies are completely unregistered. They're done, away from any regulation. So that happens in this country, of course, but it's particularly prevalent in places like India, where gambling of any kind is illegal. So any gambling that happens is illegal sports betting. So if it's against the law to gamble in a country, they are still doing it, and these tend to be. I mean, India is one of the countries that was associated with match fixing, particularly in cricket. So if I said from there, that's what they are, and often linked to the two things up here, as well as organised crime. Okay, so that's that. If we move on, there are three key terms, so please make sure you've had a good go at making sure you understand how to define those. Give an example as you go through. So if we go on to our next section then. So, I've put that same stuff that I started at the start with the specification. So gambling in sport, it's not a form of deviance or illegal unless it involves match fixing, illegal sports betting, or bribery. Then it's illegal. So if we're saying that then, let's say we're going away from those three things. So gambling is legal. So why is it such a big problem in sport? And there's a number of reasons. So what I'm going to do is just go down one at a time and give you some reasons why gambling is such a big problem in sport, and then we'll have a look at some strategies that can help prevent it. The first reason why gambling is such a huge problem in sport is because the players themselves that take part in the game can become addicted to gambling. There's a huge gambling culture in sports such as football, and there has been in the past, and there still is. So if I give you an example of that, so I'll put in here, the first problem with gambling in sport is linked to sports players and performers. So people such as Ivan Toney, who is in the news at this very moment in time, at the time I'm recording this, can develop gambling problems. Now, it came out that Ivan Toney had a gambling addiction, and, that's an example of it. And he had over 200 breaches of betting rules. And within that, I think there was somewhere 8 or 13 of those breaches involved him betting against his own team. Now, that obviously is illegal. You can't do that. That's illegal gambling, which leads to punishments, which we'll have a look at in a second. So there's some examples. That's the first reason why gambling is a big problem in sport. So the next thing we have to have a look at then is, if you have gambling is so commonplace in sport, there is an increased likelihood of match fixing. Now, I've put onto here, if there's an increased likelihood of match fixing, the good example to use for that is the Juventus fixing referees in 2006, which is the Calciopoli scandal, if you wanted to put the specific name of that. So we can see that gambling is such a big problem in sport because it increases, if there's so much money going into sport, being bet on outcomes, it increases the chance that some people might want to fix games. On top of that then, if we go on to here, the next thing we have to have a look at is this idea, and I'm sure you can get this. If you watch a football game now on TV, it is impossible to, even whilst you're watching the game, you'll see the advertising boardings come on, and there will be Bet365, Sky Bet. It'll be everywhere. Okay. On top of that, as soon as the game stops for half time, you'll see a gambling advert. Okay. And so the reason why gambling is such a big problem is there's been a huge increase in the volume of betting adverts in the media. Now, if I said from here, that is our big one there. So you use so many different firms that would advertise in the media. On top of that, and you start to think about the next section going down from here, the increased volume of betting adverts in the media directly links to this idea of how gambling impacts society. Because us, the consumer, the people watching sport, football on TV, will see these gambling adverts. And what happens is this can lead to gambling addiction and debt for people in the general population. Okay, so you can see how that is a direct link into there. So that's that. The next thing down, why is gambling such a big problem in sport? And I suppose the biggest reason that I could possibly give here is to say, why is gambling such a big problem in sport? Because sports, particularly sports such as football and horse racing, for example, are absolutely reliant upon the income from gambling. So what we have is sports such as football have gambling sponsors, okay? And this leads to negative role modeling. So you see now, I put an example here, which I haven't actually put it as an example in my text, but it'd be good if you could put that in. So if I said here, the picture I've got actually shows the Bet365 stadium here. That is a betting company. It's Stoke City Stadium, and they have named their stadium after the betting company that sponsors them. Now, if you are a supporter from there, that means you see Bet365 every time you go there, okay? And that might lead to people, gambling. And obviously, if football has gambling sponsors, this leads to negative role models. It's almost encouraging people to gamble. I put down another one down into here to say that another problem with gambling in sport is that, as well as having increased likelihood of match fixing, as we set up here, there is also likely to be a rise in illegal sports betting, okay, as we talked about earlier on the slide before. The final thing I'm going to say why gambling is such a big problem in sport, I think, is the change in the last 10 to 15 years of gambling moving online. Now, because you can now, at the click of your phone, within 3 to 4 clicks, you could be gambling and spending money. Okay, and it's not like you're spending physical money. So if I said from here, I put onto here online, so there's easy access to online betting. So they'd be our key things I'm looking at there. So if I said to you at that point, okay, they are our key reasons why gambling is so problematic in modern sport and indeed society. I'll just put it onto here. If you want to have a go at pausing, you're more than welcome now, just to see, if you looked at those, how many of those could you remember from what I just talked about. So I'm going to give you a second to pause it now and just maybe have a look through that. Why is gambling such a big problem? Can you remember what those key pictures stand for at this point? Okay. Right, so I'm going to move on then now. So let's have a look at our final subsection, which is basically looking at strategies to prevent illegal gambling in sport. Now, illegal gambling, remember, is something that breaks the laws. So if we're saying, what are the strategies to prevent gambling? I'll put into here the most current and topical example I could think of. Ivan Toney, as I said earlier, 232 breaches of regulations, and he has just been hit with an 8-month ban. And particularly, the main reason why this ban is so long was because within those 232 breaches, he was betting on his own team's results. So if I said to you from here, what are those key strategies then? First one, we've got laws and rules have to be created to prevent players betting on their own sport. So this is what Ivan Toney did, bet on football games. On top of that, he also bet on his own team, as I said. So they are one strategy that can be used to prevent it. And of course, if those rules are broken, this then has to be aligned to punishment. So long bans for players, and I've put that example here. So we've got the 8-month ban for Ivan Toney in that situation. If you wanted to put one more, I'm pretty sure I haven't put that on. So if you want to add this on, one other way, strategy to prevent illegal gambling, is we could talk about this idea of education. If you want to add that to it now, so education could also be used there. So, example we looked at in violence, anger management classes at the Sporting Chance Clinic. You can also have gambling addiction sessions at the Sporting Chance Clinic. So if you want to put that on as well, that would be absolutely great. Thank you very much.